Okay, so feel free to have your, camera on. I would love this to be interactive. And if you aren't comfortable with that, that's no problem as well. So I am Kim Shapira. I'm a registered dietitian. I have been in private practice for over 25 years. And my degree is in human metabolism and clinical nutrition. My undergraduate degree is in exercise science and kinesiology and psychology. So I have a very vast education in the human body and the mind. And there is so much in the world today about what's happening with food and medicine that I just want to be able to share as much as I can with you for you guys to make decisions on taking care of yourself in the best way possible. A little background about me is because I don't know if anybody knows me, but I'm going to share this information because I think it really helps people understand where I'm coming from. So my story is that I used to think of myself as almost a sick kid. I spent a year in and out of the hospital when I was 12, and I used to go see my specialist at UCLA every Wednesday. And because I thought of myself as a sick kid, I really had this need to be healthy. Doctor mentor friend of mine in high school had told me that food could make you sick or healthy. And as I was applying to colleges and thinking about my future, I thought, that's it. I'm going to pick a career in food and help people be healthy. And then I went to graduate school and I did all the things, and I decided to have a private practice so I could really understand people and their relationship with food, and I could have a relationship with my clients. And my first client was a therapist, and she followed my plan, and it was amazing. And I helped her lose 30 pounds. We got her off of her cholesterol medicine, her blood pressure medication, and her health was improved. And then she said to me, I'm going to gain the weight back. And I thought, why would you do this? And it also emotionally triggered me because I felt like a failure. And she said to me, well, my husband would like to be intimate with me all the time, and I was molested as a child. And for me, where I had thought I had been so right in my approach, I had been so wrong, and not understanding that my clients had this whole inner world happening. And so my education from there became more about spiritual psychology and quantum physics and neuroscience, and really figuring out why we do the things that we do. And I started also realizing that my clients eat the way that I shop. And as I started kind of applying these methods to myself, I started applying them to my clients. And I will tell you, I was on the phone with my mom one day trying to hurry up the conversation because there was a sale at Bloomingdale's, and she laughed at me and she said, Kim, there's always a sale at Bloomingdale's. And I was like, this cannot be true. And it really caused me to be curious and to see that my mom was right, actually. And I started applying this logic to food and telling my clients, there's food everywhere and we can get food anytime we need it. And they started feeling safer. And so I started really using what I was learning through shopping with food. And it's all based on science. And it all has to do with your human body. So what I love about it is I feel like it's a GLP before it was a GLP. And so now insert all these years later, these medications that are really doing wonders for a lot of people. And in some ways, I was quoted, I think in 2022, the end of the year, when they had just kind of come out, that these medications were going to be a life vest for many people. It was going to help them really heal so many parts of their body. And, a lot of people freaked out when I said that because some people thought this was a shortcut, an easy way to do things. But I have been talking about hunger and fullness for 25 years. And so now here's a medication that directly impacts hunger and fullness. And what's more is it also talks about those emotional triggers. So I want to share a little bit about GLPs, and then I want to share about my 6 simple rules. But I want you to know that today's conversation is not for you to go one way or another, but to almost put a little bit of light where there's darkness so you can start to pave your own way and your own choice and which way you want to go. So if you have any questions, there should be a chat. Yes. Okay. So please put any questions you have in the chat, or again, like if you're on camera and you're comfortable, raise your hand and, we can have an interactive conversation. Okay. So these medications, there are about 10 of them that are used for type 2 diabetes, and some are now approved for weight loss. And the way that they work is they're called GLPs, which means glucagon-like peptide. Glucagon is a hormone we all have in our stomach. And let me explain it to you a little bit. When we eat, well, hopefully you're hungry when you're eating, and we'll get to that in a minute. But when we eat, it's actually because we're getting a signal from our stomach telling us it's time to eat. And so if you can kind of think of your stomach as this container, and there's just like all this, acid, hydrochloric acid floating around, when the lining of your stomach starts like detecting that there's less food in your body, so it's kind of like going down, it's diffusing now into your small intestine, right? When your stomach detects it, glucagon sends a signal to your mind saying, hey, we should start thinking about food. We're starting to need some fuel. So I always think of being hungry as the same as having to pee. I think we have emotional bodies and we have physical bodies, and our physical bodies communicate through these hormones, right? And so it's up to us to be able to interpret it. And what I think is really interesting is that people do not get up in the morning and think, oh my God, I'm going to have to pee 6 times today, and I don't know where those toilets are. They really trust that when they need a bathroom, they're going to find one. And yet with food, we're worried about what we're going to have next Thursday for dinner, or we're already thinking about our next meal when we're in the middle of one. We're not in that same place of trusting that food will be available when we need it, if this makes sense. So what happens with these GLPs is that it signals the glucagon-like peptide, which is very similar to the hormone that every single one of our human bodies already have, right? And so you have this hunger, which is really important, but then it slows down at how fast it goes to your small intestine, how fast things diffuse, right? So we technically put food in our mouth, and it takes 15 minutes from the food in our mouth to get to our stomach. And at that moment, we have another hormone called leptin that says, oh, I see that I'm starting to have food. I'm good. I'm safe. And it tells us we don't need to eat anymore. And so many people are in their emotional bodies, not their physical bodies, that they are not paying attention to their hunger and fullness signals. This medication really kind of slams it into you, you're full. And we all have that same ability. So if you look at my 6 simple rules, which is the first rule, to eat when you're hungry, that's glucagon saying, hey, don't forget it's time to fuel me. And then I tell you to take your normal portion and cut it in half. I really want you to eat slowly and intentionally, right? We need to chew our food and we need to make it liquid because that's the first form of digestion, right? And so what happens is then it takes 15 minutes to get from our mouth to our stomach, where then leptin now says, hey, we're satisfied. So we all have this GLP. We all have it, but it's not a like peptide. It's an actual real hormone. The other thing these medications do is let me backtrack to explain this a little bit more. So remember I said that we have emotional bodies and we have physical bodies. So we're meant to be pretty calm actually through our day. We're meant to actually be in this rest and digest headspace. But unfortunately, we're all chronically stressed. So our minds are all in the emergency room almost 90% of the day. And we're all getting triggered by different things. And we develop these emotional triggers in the first 6 years of our life. And then anytime we go through something traumatizing. And then our job is really to work on mastering them. Our job is to learn how to become resilient in our mind, right? To actually come back to, I am safe. And when we're not doing that work, we're actually staying in our emotional body and we're unable to actually see how we, if we're physically hungry or not. So it's really important to do this kind of work. Now, what I want you to understand, and I have 6 simple rules, but I'm going to say rule 0 is to know where your mind is. Okay. And one little trick that I like to use for this is to ask yourself, where is my body? And then we can all recognize it's right here. And then to ask yourself, where is my mind? And so let's all just take a moment right now to find our mind. Is our mind in this conversation or is our mind somewhere else? And it's really important for our mind to be in this moment. Okay, so does anyone have any questions so far? I don't see anyone asking any questions, so feel free to ask. Okay, so rule 0, find your mind. What these GLPs do is they actually help us with our emotional stress. Now, stress can come from, I'm really worried about the man walking towards me with a knife, or I'm in physical pain, or I'm really worried about what I'm going to have for dinner next Thursday night with my girlfriends. Okay, your body can't differentiate stress. And when we feel stressed, our body responds in under 10 seconds. And actually 1,400 different sensations fire off simultaneously, taking your digestive enzymes, your neurotransmitters, and the blood in your stomach to run to your extremities so you can escape the lion that has come into the room. The lion these days could be, lots of things, but it could be a deadline. It could be a fight with a child. It can be, money worries. It could be so many different things. Again, it could be, do I take Ozempic or not? And what happens in under 10 seconds with those 1,400 different sensations, it tips off the hippocampus. Our hippocampus is our memory center. And if you have an unhealthy relationship with food, if you have a history of eating because you feel discomfort in your body, the hippocampus reminds you, hey, the last time you felt this way in your body, we ate and we felt much better. So the thing about these GLPs is that it quiets the hippocampus. So now you can say, oh my God, I'm stressed and I'm just stressed, instead of I'm stressed and I need a cookie, right? We all have that ability, but it comes with practice. And I always like to say, we're going to Karate Kid this, we're going to Mr. Miyagi it, where he said, wax on, wax off. And, Ralph Macchio's character's like, am I done yet? And Mr. Miyagi's like, keep going because it's in the practice. And then what happened is the street kid came up to him and started fighting him. And then he was able to really apply what was automatic. And so we need to create these practices, which are my 6 simple rules, I think, pre-GLP medications, to actually have this long-lasting, sustainable result. And so we really need to know where our mind is. So before we eat, we should always ask ourselves, where is my body? Remind ourselves it's right here, and then find our mind. So another way that I want to equate this is, Gloria, I'm going to use you as an example, if you don't mind. If right now an alarm was going off, what would you do in the middle of this Zoom?
Make a change, move out of the car,
Exactly.
do something different.
Do something different, yeah. And then you would probably turn the alarm off and then kind of scan your surroundings. And once you established you were safe, you would come back to this conversation. Every single thought to eat is actually an alarm going off. And we have 60,000 thoughts. We think about food about 221 times, which is a ton of thoughts considering we eat 3 or 4 times a day. 221 is a lot. And each one of them is an alarm. And it's meant for you to go to your alarm center, find your mind, bring it into your body, turn the alarm off. You don't have to really see why you're having the alarm, but you have to know where the alarm is coming from. Why was the alarm pulled? And it could be because you're bored. It could be because you're tired or stressed. It could be because you're hungry. So remember, your body can't recognize where the stress is coming from, but the reaction is the same. And so as soon as we get really clear on why we're thinking about food, we can now better understand what our body needs. And sometimes it's a deep breath because, like I said, we're spending about 90% of our day in the emergency room in our mind when it needs to be more in this rest and digest. So we're here to talk about really these GLPs and if they're good for you or what are the benefits, what are the pros and cons. And I just wanted to really show you that we had the ability, if we use my 6 simple rules, to actually do them without. But these medications are here and they're actually not going anywhere. So currently there are about 9 million people on them. And the prediction by year 2030 is that 30 million people will be on them. And so what they're doing is they're actually helping our body. Well, let me explain this a little bit more. They're actually helping get insulin. No, they're actually helping sugar that is in our bloodstream go into the cells. And then it's slamming into us that we're no longer hungry. So the problem that I have with them is that people who are taking them may not have a healthy relationship with food. And so they may not be looking at the right places to make sure that they can have sustainable results. So this is just a quick fix. And then unfortunately, if they're not staying on the medications, they won't be able to sustain the results. And I want people to sustain the results, right? That's all I want, is for people to be their healthiest self. And so applying my 6 simple rules while you're losing weight or while you're on this will actually help that. But Gloria, I'm actually watching your face. What are you thinking?
Well, I've been following you for quite a long time, and you make so much sense to me. I haven't thought about taking any medication because I've been, doing what you've said, let the thought come and go. It's not, the alarm's going off, but I don't need food for it. I've just learned so much from you. So I just love you and wanted to be part of your
Thank you, Gloria.
webinar.
I'm so happy you're here. Thank you. I so appreciate that. Okay, good. So one thing that we need to remember is that our mind needs to know we're safe. Every single choice that we make is either a place of trust or fear. And so if we can just be really mindful, really understand what that means. So the definition of mindful is actually to know where your mind is without judgment. So, we're so busy trying to figure out why. And what if we didn't have to? What if we were just here? And here I am. And now I need to be in this moment. I don't like this moment per se, but here I am. And so once we actually come to a place of acceptance, that's the only way that we can move forward. And so remembering that my mind needs to know I'm safe and that the alarms are going off because we're spending 90% of our day stressed, that we want to be able to do practices that help relax us. Do you know just by saying, take a deep breath, it actually stimulates relaxation? Yeah, so we can all take a deep breath right now. Okay, so I see that there's a couple questions. Thank you. It says, are they harmful to those who aren't diabetic to take it? That's such a good question. So what diabetes is, well, there's so many answers to diabetes, but we have 2 hormones that really help balance our blood sugar. And the thing about blood sugar is that it's the link to longevity. The more balanced our blood sugar is, the longer, healthier we can live. So every single one of our cells has what's called a telomere. And what's the name of that plastic piece on the end of a shoelace? An anklet? I think it's like an anklet. Okay, so a telomere looks like almost that plastic piece on the end of a shoelace. And what happens when we are stressed or we have a poor diet or we have a lot of inflammation, what happens is that telomere shrinks. And as it shrinks, we age. And so balancing blood sugar prevents the telomere from shrinking. And so diabetes leads to so many other secondary issues. But what diabetes actually is it's a blood full of sugar. And we have systems in our body that regulate that. So our liver, let's say, well, not let's say it is, has a system called a glucostat. Gluco meaning glucose, glucose meaning sugar or carbohydrate. So all types of carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, starches, and milks get broken down in our saliva, actually through digestive enzymes, into sugar that we can now use for fuel in our body. What's really cool is that we can absorb, or we can store this sugar in two places: our liver and in our muscles. People who are taking a GLP-1, their BMI, body mass index, is higher than 27, which is maybe considered overweight and even obese. And what this means is that they have a high body fat. So they don't have the muscle mass to store the food that they're eating, which means they're eating when they're not hungry and they're not moving their body as often as they need. So now what you're seeing is that their bloodstream is taking in all of this sugar. And because they're not active and because there's an imbalance, their cells are not actually able to get the sugar from the bloodstream inside. Now, we use insulin to, once we eat, anytime we eat anything with carbohydrate, the insulin gets sent and it kind of like becomes a Pac-Man, and it picks up the sugar and it carries it through the bloodstream to the cells that need it. If your cells don't need it because they're already overfilled, or because you have too much stress and the key, which is the insulin, no longer matches the lock on the cell, you can't get the sugar inside. And so it stays in the bloodstream. So a couple ways to combat this is to move your body as often as you can, right? Any sort of activity really needs fuel. And so if you were to walk for 5 minutes before you ate or 5 minutes after you ate, it would actually help take that sugar inside your bloodstream and go into the cell. The problem with diabetes is that the key and the lock no longer match, and that's very detrimental and disastrous. In type 2 diabetes, they still match, but they're not enough of either. And so we really need to be adding movement and following, like eating when you're hungry, taking half your normal portion, and really considering hunger and fullness. But your mind has to be in the moment to do it. So these medications help, first of all, make you not eat as much as you would have. And then they're also helping you get the insulin into the cell, which is remarkable, right? So we're lowering blood sugar, and we're mostly doing it because we're not eating as much as we were. And because we're not eating as much as we were, we're feeling a little bit better and we're able to move more. And so now you're seeing this whole cycle, which is fantastic, because as you know, I'm always telling you, you need at least 10,000 steps, right? So I would say every person who has a high body fat, who has an unhealthy relationship with food, it's not harmful to take this medication. They can do it without the medication. They just have to really be like progressive. And some of these people who have tried to lose weight in the past didn't know how to do it correctly. They were really restrictive, which creates this whole binge cycle. And so it's very important. Hold on, please. It's very important. Too much, sorry. Okay. It's very important to make sure that you are feeling safe around food and you're being consistent with eating. So you want to make sure you're eating every 3 to 4 hours. This really helps your liver and that glucostat. So if you think about this glucostat in your liver, it's exactly like a gas tank, and it reads full and empty. And if we're really good at eating every 3 hours, then what happens is our glucostat feels safe. If we don't eat every 3 hours, then we're feeling like maybe there's a famine and our body feels unsafe, because we need a certain amount of fuel every single day. But the problem is that some people try to eat it in one sitting, and some people aren't paying attention to their hunger and fullness. So if we eat and we're not hungry, then we think our body says, oh, thanks for the calories. We must need that and store it for the winter. If we undereat, then our body says, oh, okay, I see. We have to be careful with what we have. And so that glucostat really needs to feel safe. And it feels safe by you eating every 3 to 4 hours. That glucostat, that gas tank, is responsible for putting sugar into your bloodstream. we have about 1 teaspoon of sugar in our bloodstream every single second, 24/7, to make sure that we're a go. If we were to have too low of blood sugar, we would pass out or could slip into a coma. If we have too much blood sugar, we're ending up with nerve problems and quite a few other things. So that glucose is really important, and again, needs to feel safe. Okay. So, Saffron, I know I took your question to a whole nother level, but it is totally safe for non-diabetics, especially if their body fat is high. It helps regulate their system and helps them maintain this safety. My concern with people who take it is the fact that they may or may not have a healthy relationship with food. And then they're not eating the right nutrients or portions. And this is where it gets a little shady for me. I always talk about rule number 2, which is eat what you love, but make sure the food loves you back. Now, remember, we make every single decision from a place of trust or fear. And what's really interesting is when people hear me say, eat what you love, they think I just gave them permission to eat cupcakes and cookies and ice cream. And if that's you, it's because you've been restricted or you've been restricting. And I can totally appreciate that. And so, okay, I gave you permission to eat that. But now let's see how those foods make you feel. And you're only going to do it when you're hungry, and you're going to start with half, and you're going to wait 15 minutes to see if you need more. So there's a fail safe, just like in that GLP, that is going to cause you to be fine, if that makes sense. And you will eventually see, I have a story that I often share. I had a little client, he was young, and he, every Friday night, his parents took him to a diner, and every Friday night he wanted a float of like a shake, sort of a malt. And his parents had brought him to me because they wanted him to lose weight. And so I said to the parents, let him have the malt for dinner and let's see what happens. And they really freaked out about this. And they would say he can have it when he finishes his hamburger and French fries. And I'm like hitting my, like, oh my God, you're giving him a hamburger and French fries. And I'm not sure why, and preventing the malt. And finally they gave in, and they understood that I was saying they were overfeeding him now. And if they really gave him what he wanted, he might actually see that he didn't really want that. And so after a couple weeks of this debate, they finally gave in and they let him have the malt. And after 2 weeks, he decided he was done with the malt. It wasn't satisfying. And so this is why it's so important to actually eat what you love and to go through the process, because you don't know what's yours and what is just been building your whole life. And so this rule is really the most important in teaching you how to have a healthy relationship with food, because we have so many things floating around in our head, like saying, this is healthy, this is unhealthy, this is good, this is bad, I shouldn't. And we don't really know what that means, because we could have inflammatory issues or physical problems. And what's healthy to you may not be healthy to me. And so we have to be really careful with the way we use that word. Okay, let me go back to these questions. How do you turn the alarm off once you realize it's not about food? Yeah, great question. So here's your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala. And we know rationally that food is fuel. And the second we have an alarm going off, we flip our lid. Right? This is a protective mechanism. This is the way that we can kind of go into fight or flight and say, how do I take care of myself here? Now, we talked about resilience, and our job is to get from here to here as fast as we can. So here, food is fuel. Here, food is fun. Food is entertainment. Food is comfort. Food is joy. And food is the enemy. So your question is, how do we turn the alarm off when we're in a temper tantrum and we're thinking food is something other than fuel? The way that we do it is by taking deep breaths. And that's how we regulate our nervous system. Okay, so what else?
What are you doing?
I'm going to mute you. Okay. Okay. Do you need to do something different? No, you just need to accept the moment you're in. Okay. So if you're on a GLP and I finally got to my goal weight and I don't want to be on it forever, how do you get off the medicine safely? Great question. the way that you do that is that you, hold on one second. Okay. The way that you do that is you will stop the medication, and most people take these medications every 7 days. And what you will do when you reach your goal weight, which is actually not the goal is to get to a goal body fat. And for men, it's under 18%. And for women, it's between about 18 and 24%. Every single 1% is equivalent to 3 pounds. In general, our weight is related to water, fat, and muscle. And most people who aren't paying attention to their body fat and they've lost weight have actually lost water and muscle. And so the goal is to make sure that this time you're only losing fat. And the way to do that is, again, back to my 6 simple rules, and to make sure that you are moving your body, you're working on your sleep, you're drinking your water. And I have so much more of this information in my masterclass and in my book. So if that's something you're interested in, please read those things and watch that video. But in general, it's not the weight you're concerned about, it's the body fat that you're really deeply concerned about. You want to make sure you're in this range. Think about your metabolism like a stovetop. And if each one of us have 6 different, what are those called? Whatever we use to cook. I'm totally at a loss for words, but if we have a stove ranges, what are they called? So we have 6 burners, there we are, on these stovetops. When we have a high body fat or higher than normal, again, 18% or lower for men and 18 to 24% for women, when it's higher, then what happens to those 6 burners is we might only have 1 on. Maybe we only have 2 on. And imagine trying to cook Thanksgiving dinner with only 1 or 2 burners. It's so slow. But by moving your body and eating small meals, and often you actually turn them back on. And this can happen in 3 or 4 days. So we want to be doing all 6 of these rules while we're on these medication, for sure, for sustainability. But how do you get off of it? Your body fat is ideal, which means you've lost the right weight. And now you're really taking this shot or pill and you're spreading it 2 weeks, maybe even like 14 days or 20 days. So you started at 7 days and now you're spreading it to 14 or 20 days. And you're still doing all of these 6 simple rules because that's the way that you're going to maintain, right? So the 6 simple rules, one thing to think about, it's kind of practice. That's Mr. Miyagi, Karate Kidding, this whole thing. While you're following these rules, they're actually how you're going to sustain. You're creating these habits that are now going to be the new you. And so hopefully that makes sense. So you won't gain the weight back. You're just going to slowly wean yourself off with this practice. The thing that I would say, that I often say, is we cannot predict the storm. So we don't know when we're going to be emotionally triggered. We could be doing so great, and then all of a sudden weeks go by and we realize, oh my gosh, I haven't been doing this. That's not how I want this to go. It has to be a practice. And again, resilience has to be like your mantra in all things. You need to be practicing getting back to these 6 simple rules as often as you can. Okay, good question. Is 10,000 steps a day enough exercise? You're trying to lose weight even on a GLP. Great question. So actually, exercise does not help you lose weight. There is like this major myth that people think that exercise helps you lose weight. The reality is that it helps you stay the same weight, which actually is our goal, right? So we need these 10,000 steps because we need all the benefits of what it gives us when we're trying to sustain. So some of those benefits are, it balances our circadian rhythms, which is our sleep and wake cycles, which means we're having low cortisol. We're not having, adrenal fatigue, and our insulin is being, we have enough insulin, so we're not resistant. So think about insulin resistance like the cell is no longer detecting the insulin, which is the key. So it can't get the sugar into the cell, right? That's no longer happening when we move our body and do these steps. Helps with wake and sleep. It helps with your mood. It helps with your digestion, and it helps you maintain your weight. So very important for long-term sustainability. We've been saying 10,000 steps forever, and I've been saying it. It's part of my rules, but the reality is it's 10,000 movements. And so you can even see I'm talking with my hands. You want to be active. When we are standing, our metabolism is at actually 100%, but when we sit, it drops to 30%. The more that you can be active, the faster your metabolism is going to be. So just doing things throughout the day is enough, because the average American is getting about 3,000 steps, and we need at least 7,000 to reduce our risk of sudden death and to lower our risk of Alzheimer's and all sorts of things. But remember, we talked about blood sugar as for longevity. These 10,000 steps are so important, and I don't care how you get them. It can be Pilates, spinning, using your hands, going up and down the stairs, finding a bathroom on a different floor. You just need to be an active person. What ends up happening is that people start really knowing that when they get triggered, they now, instead of thinking food is a good idea, they now think, I just need to get outside and move, right? We really want to create those endorphins. Okay, I've talked for a long time, way longer than I wanted. And I want to make sure that I'm answering any of your questions. And I just want to go through my notes to make sure I'm covering everything that I think you guys need to know. Does anyone have any questions about if it's a good idea for them to take Ozempic, or if it's a good idea for them just to do lifestyle changes? I was recently watching a video where a doctor was saying, we used to think obesity was lifestyle, but now we know they need to have medication. It's not true. You don't need to have medication, but the medication is there. It's available. It's not going anywhere. And I know it's scary for a lot of people, but it's here. So let's understand it a little bit. Did I interrupt somebody? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, and I'll just keep talking. Okay, so feel free to put your questions in the chat if there are any. We're wrapping up soon. I just want to make sure we're covering anything. We're starting to see that people are having less inflammatory issues, and it's probably because they're eating less, which you see that happen anyway when people make changes to their diets. So we really want to have a healthy heart, a healthy gut, and healthy brain. So I do think that you can do this without medication, but these medications, like I said, are here. Hi, Nikki. I heard that you recommend eating every 3 to 4 hours. Is it a problem to eat every 2 hours? It seems to need more food in the morning and less in the afternoon. I'd love to know a little bit more about that. It could be that the food you're eating isn't, I want to say, robust enough or sticking to you, so to speak. Like, I know if I have oatmeal and I add peanut butter to it for breakfast, I'm hungry 2 hours later. But if I have, Cheerios with flaxseed, it holds me for longer. So it could be a fiber thing. I'm just curious. We're all a little different. Is it because the food isn't holding you? Are you not eating enough? The only problem I have with every 2 hours is that it actually just can increase the bacteria that you have in your mouth, and that could lead to more like dental caries or cavities. And, our teeth are really the link to our overall body health, and your gums. So I just want to make sure you're taking good care not to have buildup on your teeth if you're eating every 2 hours. That would be my only problem. But that's a great question. Somebody trying to talk? Anybody? Okay. All right. I don't think we have much time for more, but this was fun for me, and I'm happy to do it again. If you guys have more questions, I'm available. You can DM me or email me. And I thank you for your time, and I hope this was helpful.